Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Jim Rogers. Thanks for being here, Jim, who came all the way from Red Hook. Jim is the Director of Business Development at the New York State Office of Cannabis Management, which, you know, when I read that, I was like, oh, this is going to be a great show. I can't wait to talk to that guy. Now, tell me a little bit about it just before we went on. How did you get to that position?
So I had been in state government for a long time, over 15 years. I was the Deputy Attorney General for a number of years, and I was at the Department of Labor
under who as deputy?
Cuomo.
Okay.
When Cuomo was the Attorney General, I was the Deputy Attorney General for social justice. And then I was at the Department of Labor when he became governor, sort of handling worker protection issues.
Right.
And then they were starting this new agency, and it was supposed to benefit all these people I used to represent as a public defender, people whose lives were ruined by the war on drugs, were supposed to benefit from the market if we did it right. And so I jumped at the chance to sort of help create a new agency to do that.
Right.
So, yeah.
What a fucking amazing thing.
Yeah.
So where were you a public defender?
Bronx County, 10 years, during when Giuliani was king of New York.
Okay. And he was a law and order king of New York.
He vowed to clean up the streets of New York, and from some people's perspectives he did, but the cost was tremendous on communities of color in particular.
Right,
yeah.
The cost in human lives and cost in like the families and the communities and all that shit.
Yeah, there were ways to do it without wrecking lives.
Right. And well, what were some of the ways that could have been done that would not have wrecked these lives?
Well, they had this crazy theory that somebody wrote that no one ever really thought was it a good idea or a bad idea. And the theory was called the broken windows theory.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, and that means,
which I'm like, oh, I buy that.
Right. Well, it's like, if it's proportional, I'll buy it too. But it's coming down really heavy on minor crimes.
Can you explain that theory to listeners at home?
So they didn't want people coming up to your window and washing windows because that seemed like disorder.
Right.
And they didn't, they didn't want kids graffiti because that looks like, disorder. And all of those things, to the extent they're criminal offenses, yes, they should be dealt with in a proportionate way. But people were getting arrested. And at that time, the court systems were so clogged, it'd be 2 days before you would see a judge. On this nonviolent B misdemeanor offense, and you'd be lost in Rikers Island for days.
All right, let me play devil's advocate on this. Yeah. If the neighborhood looks like chaos with broken windows and graffiti, and you can see somebody who's probably a drug dealer, and somebody's like aggressively window washing and stuff, that's bad for legit business. It's bad for legit citizens. And those things, the little things, not, but in aggregate, seem like a big thing. They should be dealt with.
Yeah, totally. And I get that point. And people need to understand that where those businesses are and where the people live, who live there are, they all want the same thing too. They don't want the graffiti. And they probably don't want the window washers, but they have some ideas about how to engage with law enforcement in such a way as to accomplish a goal without arrest or abusive tactics or, involving jail and prison for minor things. There's other ways to correct that behavior.
Such as?
Well, such as the fact that, there are such strong institutions in a lot of these communities we're talking about, through the church, through community organizations, through, outreach, through engagement with programs for teens, let's say. And none of those institutions are ever engaged in the process of actually accomplishing that goal. So it's all of that's going on. It's this very rich sort of history about, how people are living together. And then overlaid on top of that is this very strong police presence that's physically abusive, constitutionally abusive. And so if you might achieve the goal of taking away graffiti, but what you've torn in the social fabric, when there's no trust left of the police, that actually makes the neighborhood more dangerous. Because cases are driven by witnesses, and witnesses are cooperating with police. And if every day you walk home, you're stopped and patted down by the police, your trust is broken in the police.
Right.
Or if a kid gets lost in the system and the parents can't find them for 48 hours because they spray painted something, their trust is lost in the system. So now the police are other. They're not part of your community. They're something, so there's a place in the middle to meet where the kind of abuses that you witnessed, which really did tear the social fabric. I watched it with my own eyes, and I'm picking a jury to try the case. You can see that the trust in the police is gone, especially in Bronx County during those years, just gone. And so that was the cost. It wasn't just the cost of the individual, but the whole community had checked out of trusting the police.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, tell me why. I mean, the police are not there to be friends or just to continue with the devil's advocate to be trusted. They're there to nick criminals.
Yep.
So why is that so horrible that trust in police in these communities is breaking down?
So, for instance, if you want to stop, a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old from tagging a structure, I'm not sure, and you want overall that community to get safer, and that is based on a trust relationship between law enforcement and a community. You don't take that child off the streets and then he disappears for 48 hours,
right?
And then the parents are frantic and no one knows what's going on. That's probably the worst way to solve that problem.
Right.
I think there's a way to do both.
Right.
And good modern policing techniques and also prosecutorial engagement, good prosecutors like our new DA in this county, they really are paying attention to community engagement.
This county meaning Duchess. Okay.
Has a new DA just elected.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who is that?
His name's Anthony Parisi.
And what do you like about him?
I was on a ticket with him running for countywide office. There was 4 of us because he gets that sweet spot exactly.
Right.
He's the head of the Major Crimes Bureau before he was elected to DA. He was the head of the Major Crimes Bureau, so he understands law enforcement.
Right.
And he understands that crime and police. We need police, we need prosecution, but he also understands that safety is built from the ground up.
Right.
And so his plan, is to achieve that.
Right.
So his engagement plan with the communities that are going to be policed in this county is aiming at developing a cooperative, supportive relationship to fight crime. Because everybody wants safe streets, even people that live in unsafe places.
Right.
Their first need is safe streets. And so he thinks that we can use the resources to do a better job.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. We need good police. We need good judges. Do we need good prisons and jails?
I didn't know how deep we'd go, how fast we'd go.
Here's why I asked. My kid is getting an MFA in curation of art, and with an emphasis on art that seeks to end the carceral state. How does art do that? Well, we'll see when she graduates and start curating those shows. But a lot of, as I tuned into that, which is only in the last year or so, I hear lots of younger people who are like sort of really against the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
And think, we just shouldn't have prisons.
Yeah.
And, I'm 63. I'm like, it'd be chaos. How could we do that? And I'm guessing that you've thought about this on a lot deeper level than I have. So,
prisons and jails can help in the goal of, if your goal is to protect people from violent criminals, there's a role for it to play. But so prisons can be used for safety, but they can't be used for rehabilitation.
Right.
They can't be used to achieve any other goal than locking someone up. And so some people might need to get locked up. If you're hurting other people, you need to not be on the streets.
Right.
Full stop. There's no middle ground there. You could, after that lockup happens, you could start looking at the causes that led to that crime and maybe start addressing some of those issues. But if someone's hurting people, they need to be taken away from other people because we need to be safe. But the other goals that people claim are involved, especially the ones that, involve nonviolent crimes, they're never achieved in prison. They're never achieved. There's no rehabilitation happening in prison.
Never is such a fucking strong word. I I know there's lots of organizations like the Barred Prison Initiative and many others who trying to rehabilitate through education and building esteem and art programs and all of this. And you say never.
Well, it's not a policy goal, is what I mean to say. I'm saying once people are there, and maybe if the right people are there, their lives not being dead ends is a great thing for everybody, both them while they're there and us when they leave. Right. It's I support that, but as a policy goal, what are we trying to achieve by incarceration, short-term incarceration in a jail or long-term incarceration in a prison? What are we trying to achieve? There's a goal of safety, there's a goal of rehabilitation, and
maybe a goal of it being a deterrent
and deterrence, sure, and deterrence also, but only one of those is a sure thing. Taking someone off the street will keep us safe from that person. The other two, I think, are highly speculative.
Right.
Certainly deterrence, it's out there. I think it's questionable how well it actually works.
Right.
Especially in the world of violent crime, which are usually crimes of desperation or crimes of passion. They don't usually involve the pathologies of sociopaths. They can, but they don't usually.
Right.
And so I don't know how well prison deters the kinds of crimes we want it to deter. I don't think it rehabilitates on a level at the scale that we're locking people up at all.
Right.
And so I do think it achieves that one narrow goal of community safety in the right circumstances, and it should be used.
Right.
But it should be used for the right people in the right amount.
So you would never want to do away with the prison industrial complex completely.
I wouldn't. It's too easy. That slogan is just too easy. Prison industrial complex. It's so easy to say. Like,
people do like easy. I mean, thinking deeper is difficult.
Yeah, but we can do it.
Well, we can do it right now.
No, and everybody can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are allowed
everybody can, but people don't.
Well, one of the reasons they don't is because we're so busy shutting each other up, so we don't. So I could sit here with someone who says, talk about the prison industrial complex and say eliminate all prisons, and we can have a long conversation. At the end of that conversation, we may take a few inches towards each other instead of away from each other.
Which is great.
Which is probably the outcome on a lot of these shows that you do right now.
I don't know if anybody's minds are...
But our lives are organized by tech companies to have us stay in these bubbles to increase tribalism, because that's how they make their money. Right. And so no one's making money in bringing us to the conversation, but we can come up with incredible policies.
Right.
Even people just being introduced to a topic have a great idea. If they want to open their ears and open their minds, it's incredible what can happen.
All right, I'm just gonna... Give me an example of that happening recently. You've seen somebody opening their minds to an idea, and it just working out great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a great example. When I had the privilege of running for a judgeship that I lost this past
family court judge
for Dutchess County.
Okay,
it was a countywide seat, and the playbook is, here's the list of people who vote Democrat in how many elections. Go knock on those doors, and that's how you win. I didn't want to do that.
Right.
I wanted to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to everybody about, and so I met tons of people who had incredibly different ideas.
Do you have a number? How many people did you meet?
Oh, I don't know. Jeez. I mean, I knocked on so many doors, I can't even think. I made so many phone calls, I can't even keep count.
Right.
I mean, I went to so many events where I had an opportunity to talk to people, and I mean, the thousands of people. And the idea was to communicate what I thought were the problems, why I thought that I could fix them, and I may have said something that someone really disagreed with, like, keep families together. I met somebody who thought that message was, a message that keep families together was a message that appealed to the right, they thought, in such a way that because it meant that even families that might need to be apart because of a domestic violence situation, for instance, could be, thought of as like there's a larger goal of keeping families together rather than protecting victims. And there are people who think that way. And there are a lot of judges who rule that way.
Oof.
who rule for joint custody even when there's clear domestic violence and it's bad domestic violence. Judges in this county right now will award joint custody in those situations when that's crazy. Because
their guiding principle is keep families together. They don't care about the cost.
It's not that right. The one of the people in that family could have an active criminal case for aggressive battery against the other parent.
Right.
And a judge will still award joint custody.
Right.
There may be some parameters to protect people, maybe orders of protection, but the custody is joint, which means that the daily decision making about the child's welfare that we all make every day as parents is joint.
Right.
Now, can you imagine being forced to make joint daily decisions about doctors, about school, about friends, about play dates with someone who has a pending criminal charge against them for breaking your jaw? It'd be impossible.
Jesus.
You would think it should never be on the table. And so one of the things I was campaigning on was that that is a non-starter for me, or would have been had I won. I lost by 0.64%. I want to be clear. I know it's very, very close.
Thanks for the clarifying. Well, listen, holy crap, we just sprinted right out of the gate.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I don't know what the pace is.
I need a break. It's not usually like that. And you, in keeping with the tradition of the show, you brought a cocktail for us.
I did.
What did you bring?
I brought some eggnog.
Oh, good.
And some rum.
Oh, good.
And I pre-mixed it. I made sure it was ice cold. Very, very important.
Oh, good.
For eggnog, because it can get a little...
Did you make the eggnog?
Can I say no?
You can say whatever you want.
I bought it from Locavore Market in Red Hook, New York.
Locavore Market. What is that? What kinds of things could one find there?
It's an incredible place. It's just this place with all locally produced food and gifts, right?
Right.
And if it's not local, it's not in there. So it's this delightful place to hang out. It's like this place.
Right. Well, and in fact, it's the sister store of this one, the fabulous Epicurean in wonderful Rhinecliff.
I go there as often as I can.
Yeah, me too. I love the Locavore.
Because I just love being there.
Whenever I'm in Red Hook, I go to the Locavore.
Exactly. There's a lot of good places popping up in Red Hook, and it's probably going to be the place that has the first dispensary anywhere near here.
Yeah, and why do you think that?
Just because villages and towns and cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Because villages and cities and municipalities were allowed to opt out, and many did.
Right.
And on our side of the river, everybody opted out except for Red Hook.
But, Rhinebeck opted out. I remember at the time thinking, fucking opt out because you can opt in later if you want.
Yeah.
But once you opt in, you can't then opt back out.
Correct.
And Rhinebeck was like, we're just going to see how it goes.
Sure.
And we'll opt in later if it makes sense.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm voting for that.
Yeah. And I think that was a totally prudent move.
Yeah.
Totally. People have to really see, how's the traffic going to go? Is the place going to integrate with the community well?
Right.
Are we bringing in too many people? Is there a rise in behavior that people don't want? Are tons of people blowing bones? That's language from the 70s where I grew up.
Blowing bones.
Out in the street just because they bought it just then from retail, which is a big no-no. You can smoke where tobacco's allowed to be smoked.
Right.
That's the law.
Right.
So just because you bought it at a retail place, if it's not allowed, in that village, to openly smoke, then it's not allowed for cannabis either.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right, you said blowing bones from when you were a kid, and that brings up the lightning round. We had a lightning round here.
We already have the lightning round.
Quick quiz. Which one? And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 questions. Each one's a group of 4. Which one of these is not a slang word for marijuana? Weed, pot, reefer, frog dip.
Frog dip.
Grass, dope, ganja, fudgy the whale.
Fudgy the whale.
Banger, chiba, hash, herb.
Banger.
That's right. Skunk, boom, chi-chi, chronic.
Chi-chi.
That's right. Plunder, chiba, blunt, baby, bang, and that's spelled B-H-A-N-G.
I would say plunder, but
that's
I could
correct.
Be wrong. Yeah.
That's correct. You're batting 1,000 so far.
Thanks.
Petunia, hot stick, jolly green, bobo bush.
Petunia.
God damn, you're good. Bomber, Chuckles, Dank Nubs, and Juanita.
Chuckles.
God, you're so good. Alice B., Mary Jane, Rosemarie, and Kimmy Berlin.
Kimmy Berlin. I'm wrong.
That's right.
Wrong?
No, you're right.
Thank you.
The last one, and for a perfect score and some kind of prize from either the locavore or the Epicurean.
Oh my God.
Mr. Green, Reverend Green, Nixon, or Tricky Icky?
Nixon.
Tricky Icky. I'm so sorry.
I got it. I'm branding Tricky Icky.
Huge.
I'm
That's
now
what everybody who hears the question says.
Really?
Tricky
so shout
Icky.
out, Tricky Icky's mine.
Yeah, Nixon, according to Wikipedia, which is like, as we know, the perfect source for all information ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so well curated.
It says that Nixon is a slang for weed. Well, you did better than anybody I tried this out on.
All right. Well, it is in this odd twist of fate, it is my business.
Yeah, it is.
Weed is my business.
And
yeah.
so back to, you were working at the DA's office.
The Attorney General.
Attorney General.
That's statewide, yeah.
Okay. And then you got an opportunity to open up this new office.
So I went to the Department of Labor for a long time.
Okay.
And that was all about like protecting workers from wage theft, from unsafe work conditions, from retaliation, that kind of thing. It was a big operation.
So you're just liberal as the day is long.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But that's great. God bless you, protecting workers. And
no, but these ideas, it's funny, liberal, conservative. I mean, these ideas are all just, they're designed for outcomes, right? And so as long as I'm getting the job done, I mean, call it whatever you want, right? Getting money back, their stolen wages, recovering stolen wages, that was my business for 10 years.
Wow.
So we brought a lot of money back to poor people.
Right.
And, tried a strategy where we thought it should be a criminal offense of grand larceny if the number was large enough. And
so were there many class action suits on that? I mean, we're talking wage theft and tip garnishment and crap like that?
There's plenty of that. There are tons of great private attorneys out there doing class actions, suing employers on behalf of workers to get to recover their wages, recover their interest and penalties, and all that stuff has to go to workers. And then other than that, there is the Department of Labor in New York State, which is puts a lot of resources and energy into wage recovery and as a regulator. So
that's great. And does that effort vary according to sort of what political party is at the helm?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, every state agency, is resourced according to the politics of the day, right? I mean, it doesn't, it's, I think that generally speaking, Republican governors tend to not support the regulatory bodies, and they support the economic development bodies, and Democrats tend to embrace the regulatory bodies more. And I don't think.
But let me just say, without really being anti-business, I mean, they still want to bring in business and support growth and all that.
Totally,
by and large,
and they're not exclusive. In fact, if you really look at the issue closely, what you end up getting is understanding that people who pollute, for instance, pollute water and air in neighborhoods, it's not only bad for the people that live next to them, it's just bad for business overall. It's just bad. It's bad to open and operate a business and try to create an ecosystem that's integrated with the community and break all these rules that are harming people. You're stealing from your workers, you're polluting the air, you're polluting the water, you're acting in a discriminatory manner, whatever it may be. These are all basic value systems that everybody shares. I don't care what your political party is. Everybody wants clean air and water.
Except for the person who's running that company that's doing that polluting.
It's so funny. That's another awesome question because I have met so many people, right? I've spent 17 years engaging with people, mostly who own businesses who are breaking the law in one way or another, right? That's what we pursued bad guys in the AG's office. We pursued bad guys in the Department of Labor. Spent all this time chasing bad guys around, and using the state's regulatory might to do it. And it's the intent to harm was much less present than I expected. And looking into the soul of a person, I'm not like George Bush looking into Putin's eyes and seeing his heart, but I mean just the people I met made really bad mistakes out of fear that if they didn't cut certain corners, they would lose their business. So there was this whole fear model, and part of good regulation is to say, here's what it would have cost you if you actually followed the law as it was written. Here's what you think you've saved yourself. And actually, the penalties in this case very well may put you out of business. So bad choice on your part.
Whereas compliance might not have.
Right. And actually, they never ended up, if you could just have a few minutes with them and not treat them, as evil.
Right.
When I first got into it, I just figured they were evil and I was psyched to go catch them. But then I learned, people made mistakes. And if you gave them a second chance and to get into compliance, they would get into compliance and they would stay in compliance.
Okay, and then did you follow up after that?
Yes.
And you were right.
Yes.
That's fucking amazing. That's so good.
It's sort of a love model of regulation and law enforcement. Do you know what I mean? We don't have to be good guys and bad guys, except for the really bad guys who need to be in jail. But the rest of us don't. That whole good guy, bad guy thing, it's this incredible human passion. I'm drawn to the work because, I'm all fired up on the part of me is all fired up. I want to go find the bad guys and crush them, and then you get with them, and there's so much good there. If you can just back up a little bit, give someone a chance to breathe.
Right.
Wow. They'll get into compliance with the law. They'll stay in compliance. They'll be an incredible corporate citizen.
Right.
It's amazing. It does happen.
So it sounds a little bit like there's a breakdown of knowledge. It sounds like marketing could solve some of this. Hey, if you're not in compliance and you do that, then you're going to go out of business because the fine's going to be so high. And if you do want to comply, it's not going to be so bad. I mean, a little bit of education ahead of time might prevent people from making these mistakes.
Right. And and I agree. So our messaging is not ideal, and the whole ethos of
But that's not the job of your office, really, is it? That messaging.
It should be. I mean, in some ways, when I was there, I left there obviously and went to Cannabis, but I think I could never decide, when I was running these worker protection operations, did I want to be somebody that people feared, or did I want to be somebody that people, wanted to deal with? And I was constantly on either side of that border. I had a borderline personality. I mean, I was always on one side of that border or another, we can do this, kumbaya, let's get it done, or we show them, We've got to show, power. People have got to fear this agency. We're never going to deter people. We're going to be chasing our tail for decades. They have to fear us. And I guess we backed into a more gentle compliance model after we went fiercely at it, and that worked for at least for my tenure there. But
all right, who's driving the ship when it's put in reverse and back into that kind of thing?
No, so at that point in time, when I was deputy commissioner for worker protection, I was driving the ship. So I was making those decisions. So I was like, let's try it this way. Let's try it that way.
And was that a hard sell?
Not really, because the team, just at the time, had this fantastic team.
Right.
And
so who did you report to? Who did you have to sell that idea to?
All of my ideas, were sold basically directly to the governor's office. There was a commissioner of labor, of course, but at least during the Cuomo years, the commissioners were largely figureheads. Okay. I don't know if that's still true. So these sorts of ideas of how we're going to approach a certain situation in an industry that's completely gone off the rails, like nail salons, for instance. We led this effort to reform nail salons.
Okay, I know nothing about this.
Yeah, it's bad news for workers in nail salons for tons of different reasons.
Okay.
And the state engaged on this all-out effort to reform nail salons. And
when was this?
And that was, 2017, I want to say.
See, I stopped going to nail salons that year.
Exactly. There was this great reporter, I don't know if she's still there, at the New York Times, Sarah Neer, and she wrote this long expose, and it made it onto the front page of the Times.
I missed it all. What were the issues?
Rampant wage theft.
Okay.
Rampant retaliation, which means if you complain, you not only get fired, I want my money is a complaint, you'd get fired. But because the world was so small among nail salon owners, not only in New York City, but throughout the state, everybody knew each other. People would get blackballed. They'd never get another job. So these were often undocumented immigrants working in a nail salon situation. They could be working 14 hours a day. They were supposed to make the minimum wage. They never did. So that was rampant. And plus there was some health and safety issues, the fumes, the dust, you know, all of these things. If you complained, you not only got fired, but you got blackballed forever.
And where were the undocumented immigrants from, primarily?
All over. In nail salons, a lot were from China.
Uh-huh.
A lot were from Vietnam.
Okay.
A smaller amount, but substantial amount, Nepal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a part of the world.
Yeah. And, you know, those folks that opened those nail salons, they had gone through the gauntlet and become business owners themselves. And in their minds, I came to learn, started just like the person that they were.
So in their minds, that's how you pay your dues.
It was like hazing.
You don't complain.
Right. It was hazing. You never complain. And when they finally did start to complain, the state got involved.
And, you know, God bless the state for taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Undocumented immigrants, they're not voters. They don't have any power. You know.
Yeah.
It'd be really easy for somebody, some bureaucrat, to be, no, we got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
But somewhere, somebody, you or your office said, we're going to listen and we're going to do something.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, at the time, I mean, we could talk about our prior governor all you want. I mean, I started working for him in 2007. By the time he became governor,
this is Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, he actually cared about these issues. I shit you not.
Right.
He when it came to like protecting the powerless, like he had the fire. I don't know what to say.
Right.
He actually was the one that said we got to do this and like do an all out effort thing, like the likes of which we had never done before. We wrote regulations. We like changed our enforcement model. We created new statutes. We created like new investigatory models, like all in like a 3-month period.
Right.
It was incredible.
That's pretty fast.
It was fast. He wanted it done when he wanted it done. He's a hard guy to say no to also, by the way.
Yeah. Huh. So
like he would chop your head off. Literally, and put it in your hands. When I was working at the AG's office,
was there a special office that looked into the head chopping?
Yeah. No, you had to like go to that place and find your own head,
right,
and take it off the shelf and like beg to have it reattached. You know, I was working at the AG's office, and there was a probate happening of the Astor will. And the AG had to make an appearance for some reason. And so, like, everybody was uptight because the Post was, like, in the courtroom every day. And we had to send this guy from the Charities Bureau to, like, make a statement to the court about something. And we very precisely, word after word after word, you know, literally wrote it down on, like, a fortune cookie size piece of paper. Say this and only fucking this. Okay, that's it. Got it? And then we were on a road show. So we were all, like, in Buffalo promoting the Attorney General or something like that. And I got off the plane with the head of the investigation unit, this great guy, Joe D'Amico, and his phone rang, and he's like, "It's for you." And so apparently there was an article in the Post because the guy had said something wrong, and got just eviscerated by the judge. And so on page 3 of the Post, there was like a full page thing about how the AG was inept when it comes to, you know, because he didn't say the thing, he freeformed it.
Oh, no.
And he improvised it. And I was the person, so I got called into the office, and the office is packed. Everyone there for the show.
Right.
And I have the file.
The show of your beheading.
Yeah. And he looks at me, and then he looks over my head to anybody else in the room. He's like, "Is there anybody here that knows what the fuck they're doing?" And it wasn't like explain to me what happened. He just held out his hand, took the file, and I was dismissed. And I had to, like, go get my head out of the cold storage.
Wow.
That's him.
And now you guys are golf buddies and poker friends?
No. Yeah. We haven't talked in years.
I heard somewhere that he's running ahead of Eric Adams in some kind of poll for mayor of New York right now.
I mean, poor Eric Adams. He's got it tough right now through a lot of problems that aren't his. So anyone's going to seem really appealing.
Right.
But I hadn't seen that poll, but I
hadn't seen. I heard about it.
It's
so
probably. I could see that.
Yeah.
I could actually see him winning that race. By the way. As frightened as you all may be of that notion.
Our station owner here is saying no, but So how do you think he would make a good mayor? I mean, I like what you said about him, like really fucking caring about these issues that would have been much easier to say, no, we're not doing that.
Like, I can't overlook the accusations, and the reasons that he resigned still exist today. It's a hard thing that I'll never forget, and I don't think the voters are going to forget. Right. Well, that's that. Either way,
it's a good answer. You can't overlook the accusations. And
you can't.
It's a politically astute answer. I mean, who knows where you're going to go from here and whatnot.
I'm terrible at politics, but
I wanted to ask about that because I watched a couple of videos of you talking to people online, and in one of them you're talking to Assembly Member the Honorable Khalid M. Anderson, and he's asking you about banking in the cannabis business.
Yeah, banking.
And at one point, somebody, actually it might have been the second interview, somebody asked you if you thought that public banking would help that system, and you said, well, this is not an official OCM, Office of Cannabis Management answer, but it's my personal opinion. And then you gave the answer. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's kind of remarkable. I mean, you don't hear politicians or bureaucrats, really, of any ilk, not singing the company song.
Yeah, and I'm proud to be a bureaucrat.
Yeah, that's good.
My family's from Russia and all that. It's like we're good at this. But I'm like a real. I will always. Yeah, sometimes I will always say exactly what I think, and I might have to say this is coming from me and not the agency, and that may or may not save me. I have no idea, but I can't say something else.
Yeah, but people don't do that even that much. Saying this is just my opinion, doesn't represent the agency. People don't even do that.
Right. I mean, you can do it at the Office of Cannabis Management because we have this executive director. This guy, I don't know if you know him or heard about him. His name is Chris Alexander. He's a total visionary.
I thought for sure it wasn't going to be visionary, but stoner.
No, he's an incredible visionary. Like I've never really seen anything like it. He basically wrote this statute, and then he was given the opportunity to run this agency, which he wouldn't have gotten if Cuomo was still the mayor, because still the governor. Because so he's an incredible person.
What did he write? A statute?
He wrote the law that legalized cannabis, and the law and basically the law contains the framework of what the market structure should be.
Okay.
And how social and economic equity are the goals.
Right.
So we've made this no longer a crime, and there's going to be a market, and there's going to be winners and losers, and the state has to play a role in figuring that out. We can't just decriminalize weed, say it's legal, everybody can have it, everybody can sell it, and then let Wall Street come in and take over New York.
Right. So you controlled the licensing of the dispensaries with an eye towards giving it to the people who had been sort of really harshly punished.
That's right.
Historically.
Right.
For selling weed.
That's right. We do two things. There's anti-monopoly provisions in the statute that we put into the regulations so that, for instance, we have a two-tier market. So if you're going to open a business, you can be in the production tier, growing and manufacturing, or you can be in the selling tier, distribution and retail.
Right.
Broadly speaking.
What about transportation?
Transportation would be distribution.
Okay.
So it's going to be hard to get super rich and own a lot of market share because you're limited in the number of licenses you can have. You're also limited to your tier. Pick one or the other. Pick where you want to be. If you're in cultivation, you're not going to be able to buy a retail establishment.
So you can't have any kind of monopoly.
Because vertical integration might be better for the bottom line, but it benefits people with tons of capital up front, and it also leads to people buying up too much market share. Right. So one way to control that is control the two-tier, control it through two tiers, and then we also have limitations on how much of any license you can own.
Okay.
So the whole regulatory scheme, which was really, when it comes to this, I've met the best and the brightest, actually, at this agency, I have to say. Incredible visionaries. Anyway, so when it comes to Chris Alexander, he wants us to be us. You know what I mean? He doesn't care.
Right. He wants us to be us.
He brought in people who are like mission driven people, and he understands that we are, a pack of just a pack of rabid wolves who want to achieve this.
Right.
This thing where where the government organizes a marketplace where regular people can have a dream and open a business and not have their opportunity crushed by a Wall Street financed endeavor, as happens in every other state.
But also an office that like promotes the sort of the proactive equity of people who've been really harmed by this.
That's right. Priority goes to people that suffered through the war on drugs.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how is that going right now for, say, dispensaries? Which is the one tier.
Right. So the market rollout has been slower than people want it to be. It happened in 2 stages. It happened in an early sort of quick start conditional phase, so that farmers who had farmed industrial hemp and lost tons of money when the bottom of the hemp market fell out, they needed to be sort of rescued, and they were given the first ability to grow adult use, these distressed farmers.
Okay.
And that happened before the regulations were written. The legislature said, write the regulations for the statute to implement the statute, but in the meantime, we're going to say these people get their licenses first, and they get them now.
Right. New York's an enormous agricultural state. Right. They want to take care of their farmers.
And so the legislature created a scheme to license conditional farmers.
Okay.
Before we were ready to roll out licenses, and conditional processors, hemp processors, now turned adult use processors, to give them a lifeline while we were writing the regulations. It takes a long time to implement the statute. So we're busy writing. In the meantime, the legislature wants these things to happen first.
Right.
And so we needed to create a retail license to complete that supply chain.
Right.
And we created something called a card license, the conditional adult use retail dispensary license. And that would go to anybody who had a marijuana conviction or was a direct relative of someone who had a marijuana conviction, plus had certain income.
Reasoning that families were really hit hard by this incarceration as well. Okay.
Yes. Plus an income limitation, but plus demonstrable experience that they actually run a business before.
Okay.
So this was not going to be their first rodeo.
Narrowing things down a little bit, but still.
And then we attached it to this accelerator program that we built out, run by these incredible educators to teach people every inch of the retail market.
So far, so good.
Right.
How many applications did you get of people who met all these criteria?
Hundreds. And finally, we ended up with close to 500 people that we were ready to give.
Great.
Right.
Fabulous.
And before
so now the farmers are growing and the clippers are clipping,
and then we got sued
by
people who were entitled to certain priorities under the law, disabled veterans, other groups who were entitled to priorities under the original statute said, well, you created this new category for these first licenses, and we got left out of the mix. And we said, that's actually not what the statute says. We have the power to do this. This is just in the meantime. Having 300 licensed businesses in this state is like a drop in the bucket. Everybody be patient. We're getting there. And instead they sued us and they shut the program down.
Well, why? How the hell does it get shut down? Just because of a bunch of unhappy people? Or
because the judge made a bad decision.
Okay, so now the growers are growing, the trimmers are trimming, everybody's set to go, but the dispensaries aren't there.
There's no shelf space.
What you call it, the card licenses?
Yeah.
Are not being doled out. The retail spaces are not being opened. And what's happening to all the weed that people are growing?
I mean, this situation and this lawsuit and this injunction brought many, many people, both on the retail side who were expecting their license and were told they were going to get one, and on the cultivation and processing side to the brink of absolute ruin.
Right.
And
Right, let me just say,
they're not wrong.
For people listening at home, like, your mood has completely changed since we started talking about this. I mean, it sounds like a horrible thing, and this is probably something you're dealing with all the time. It must be very frustrating.
I mean, the lawsuit was frustrating because behind the scenes were pulling the strings on this case were the giant cannabis companies. They're the ones that drove all this.
Who were the giant cannabis companies? The national companies?
There's what they call multi-state operators, and they're in every state. They are financed by Wall Street. They have very deep pockets. They can build out years of losses into their business model and undercut everybody else. And what they want is they want it all.
Right.
And we have room for them in New York State.
Really?
Yes, there is room for certain multi-state operators to operate really profitable businesses in either tier that they choose.
But that's not enough.
But they want it all. You see, that's their problem.
Right.
And that's the problem for all of us in this economy.
In this country.
In this country right now. And it's playing out in a microcosmic way in cannabis. But we got stopped because the MSOs wanted it all.
Right.
And they couldn't have it all. They could still make a tidy profit. They could still have intergenerational wealth for their little kids who already have intergenerational wealth. Right. They could have more intergenerational. They could have had a lot.
Right.
But they wanted it all.
Right.
And they were not going to sit by while we went out and gave licenses out to poor people. This is what they're thinking.
And criminals.
And criminals.
Convicts.
Right.
Right.
They'd never been on the streets of the Bronx. They'd never watched families get destroyed by the war on drugs. I did. They didn't. And the bottom line is that they wanted it all, and so they sued us, and they found a judge who didn't completely comprehend the legal issues, in my view.
Okay. And you're a lawyer, right?
Yes.
So, but weren't the lawyer representing, the state in this
I was
case?
not the lawyer representing the state. I wish I was.
Yeah. Because I mean, right away, it's like, okay, well, that's a communication problem. If your lawyers didn't adequately educate the judges, and then they then made bad decisions. I mean, so did you all appeal?
Yeah, we went through all this. So two things happened. We went through a ton of. I'm going to grab my drink. You can see my daily job is stressful. So we had a ton of. So everybody got put on hold, and the markets on the production side started to implode into themselves. And
because they're growing.
They're growing and manufacturing
and trimming. And
creating tincture.
And they can't sell it. They're not supposed to sell it to Pennsylvania or Vermont or wherever. It's just for New York.
And they didn't. The amazing thing is they didn't.
Really?
Yes.
So they didn't. So now they've got this stockpile. Let's say that they've got 50 tons of.
There's no New York
weed.
product anywhere in the country, but there's tons of California product in New York fueling the illicit shops. But no New York license holder went outside the parameters of their license in a tribute to what they believed is going to ultimately be a great marketplace.
So that's a huge statement. That's another never statement. No New York growers going outside the parameters of their license. So they're sitting on all this volume, and none of it's slipping into the black market or the.
I mean, look, there's always allegations, and we look into it, obviously, but we know what their capacity is. We know what they're supposed to have on hand, and we understand that despite against all odds, these people, the growers and the producers could have done okay, holding on to their license, and getting significant revenue by refusing to play by the rules.
Right.
But they didn't. They just didn't.
To the best of your knowledge.
To the best of my knowledge. But we have a lot of intelligence on this, right? We understand what's going on in other states. States know if New York weed is coming in there, and they tell us.
And so now you walk down the street and say, like New York City, I mean, there's all these dispensaries. They're not licensed by the state, and they're all selling weed, and that shit's coming from California and Texas and Florida or wherever.
Yeah, but there's a reason for that.
Okay.
So legislature made this huge mistake, right? Not intentional. Their mistake was when it was no longer against the penal law to possess or sell or manufacture cannabis.
When they decriminalized it.
They decriminalized it. They didn't give the jurisdiction to any state agency or other body to enforce against unlicensed operations. That was not in the law. So the law's passed, and then there's this huge vacuum. It's technically legal now. I can't go to jail for having a dispensary.
Open a store.
I'll just open a store.
Right.
And that's really attractive. I'll put a van on the street. I'll do whatever. And there was nobody to tell them no. And then finally in the spring of 2023, the legislature finally revisited it, gave us...
That's like a few months ago.
That's a few months ago. That's why there was this explosion. So they gave us money and they gave us jurisdiction to shut down these unlicensed shops. And we're getting there. We're getting there. We're chipping away at it. But you know what we need, if the legislature is listening, we need... God, they'll hate me for this. We need triple the amount of enforcement people, to close down those
toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Oof.
But it's funny, the quality of the product that's coming out of our growers and our processors. Everyone's like, "Wait, you're growing outside, or you're growing in mixed light, or what are you doing?" And it's New York and weed and all this other stuff, and like people's minds are blown.
And how do you measure the quality of this product?
People tell me.
It's internet radio. You can.
No, I'm not. It's not a major part of my life. Although I think it is a major part of lots of people's lives that work in my agency. I mean, I've never worked with smarter people through my entire career. The thinking is
so I mean, it's legal now.
It's legal, yeah.
Which still is mind-boggling to me.
So
people,
consumers,
in your agency,
I'm obviously understanding like. There are some dispensaries open. What are they, 20 dispensaries, 10, 50? How many are open now? I should know that. I don't know.
Versus like 150 licensed growers or something,
right? And then the regular license. So the lawsuit's over now. All those licenses are coming back online right now. And plus all the regulations are finished and everybody applied for the adult use licenses, not the conditional ones, the regular ones.
Right.
Starting in October, ending in December, and the first quarter of 2024 is just going to be, the first and second quarter of 2024 is just going to be like everybody.
So that window's open. So if I wanted to open a dispensary, and call it Norm's Michoacan store or whatever.
I mean, you might have a couple more days, but it's pretty much, it was open in October, ending in early December.
And adult use was open to like everybody. You didn't need to meet those criteria.
You don't need to be there. There is, the statute says 50% of all licenses should be social and economic equity.
Right.
And there's 5 categories of social and economic equity.
Uh-huh.
There's women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, service-disabled veterans, distressed farmers, and what we call CDI, communities disproportionately impacted.
Okay.
So if you lived in, grew up in one of these...
And
so we had these incredibly these absolute geniuses, Tabitha Robinson being one of the best thinkers I've ever worked with. Taking the 40 years of arrest data and pinpointing with pretty significant clarity which communities were over-policed, for lack of a better word, assuming equal use of marijuana.
Not hard to identify, just
right,
from the
but
numbers.
It had to be identified in a scientific manner, and it was. So we have a map on our website now. You can go there and you can click on where you live, and you can see, is this a community disproportionately impacted?
Right.
So if you grew up there, if you lived there for 7 years, if you've lived there there's several criteria that options to meet that criteria, you are going to go into the social and economic equity 50% category, right? So you're going to be competing against only social and economic equity folks. Right. Yeah.
Just amazing. So it seems like you really like your job.
I do like my job.
It's so nice. It's a wonderful thing. So many people don't.
I mean, obviously, I like a lot of jobs are love-hate,
Yeah.
I mean, there's those moments that the goal is really worth achieving. And justice in a marketplace, like people don't think of these two things together.
My heart stopped just thinking of
right.
it. That's such a noble goal. And if it can be achieved in this market, then why not in other markets?
Right. I mean, people question the role of government in markets, and so do I.
Yeah.
I don't know if they produce what you want them to produce, and I think they do create a ton of friction, so I'm not sure. But in this case, it was the perfect opportunity to test drive this.
I don't think it's necessarily bad to have some friction. Amazon could have stood with a little more friction, I think.
Well, if the country's going to survive, then we're going to have to like resurrect Teddy Roosevelt, weekend at Bernie style or some other style, but somebody who really cares about the antitrust laws that are like the central foundation of the American capitalist marketplace. We don't have capitalism anymore. No. We have oligarchy because the federal government refuses to enforce the antitrust laws.
Right.
So you break up Amazon,
that's
Google.
The friction I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I mean, if we got serious about it, in 5 years we could have a brand new economy.
Who, if anybody, is going to get serious about that?
I mean, somebody. What?
Lena Khan.
Lena Khan is a name coming from our
I don't know Lena Khan. Sorry.
Or the station owner, Matt.
Lena Khan is
all right. Well, we'll look at Lena Khan then.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Then hire me. I'll help you because I'm really interested in this. Like I want.
Right.
We can't. Right. People. The inflation isn't following normal patterns, right? We have like high inflation and low unemployment. We have low unemployment and we have high inflation. That matches, but we're in a different world now where like the consolidation in grocery stores, for example,
right?
The direct impact on prices is just amazing, and people are getting killed with their grocery bills.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. But the companies are getting richer.
Much richer. They're consolidating, and like the feds are just letting them do it.
Huh. So I'm going to Google Lena Khan when I get home.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for that tip. I hadn't.
So you seem interested in a much broader realm than just what you're sort of bureaucratically
yeah, definitely.
On.
Always.
Do you have greater political aspirations?
I mean, it's hard to if there's ever a role for me to play where I think I could make a difference, if I could really help, like that
right.
Then that would be attractive in the moment. I can't think like I want this or I want that. I can think of, when I ran for family court judge, I just had seen what was happening in family court and go so wrong for the kids in this county.
And that's a part-time job, right? So you would have stayed at the office.
No, that would have been a full-time gig.
Job. Oh.
Yeah. But, something else is, if something else comes along that I think I could make a difference if I had the trust of the people I live with in this county, then of course I would think of whatever.
Right. And how long have you been in this county?
7 years.
7 years. You've got 3 kids?
I've got 3 kids, yeah.
Uh-huh. And how old are they?
They are, Rosie just turned 5 yesterday.
Wow.
And her
Rosie.
her immediate older sister is turning 8 this year.
Uh-huh.
And their older sister is 24.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
I decided to sign up for the 40-year parenting plan.
If
you want a recommendation on whether to do it, just
DM
me.
Take you a private message me. I'll give you the whole deal.
It's great.
All right. Well, we got 30 seconds. One question I wanted
it went
to
so
ask.
Fast.
It went so fast, and we sprinted the whole freaking way through.
I know.
I need another drink as soon as we're
done.
done.
At least
mushrooms, psilocybin is being legalized in Colorado and probably Oregon or Washington or one of those fucking places. Is your office gearing up to take a serious look at that, or would that be a completely different office?
I mean, that would be
together in my mind.
That would be like a completely different legislative initiative,
right?
It would start with a legislative inquiry, and ultimately become a legislative initiative.
Right.
I think it's hard to argue with the transformative properties.
Will you come back someday?
Oh man, I'd love it.
I feel like we could just talk forever.
I know.
Everybody have a happy